Weilà raga. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another lesson here in our Zero to Hero Italian grammar series, where we will be looking at Italian from the most basic and working our way up to the most advanced topics. We've now entered the realm of more advanced topics. As I always say, just because something is advanced doesn't mean it's necessarily harder from something that you've seen before. For example, our very first lesson, gender and number of agreement, is one of the most difficult things in Italian, in my opinion, because it's very easy to mess up. So that's like lesson one. You know what I mean? That's the most basic stuff that we begin with, because it can get a little bit more complex as time goes on. But the point is, with a language, everything's kind of on equal playing field, in my opinion. Maybe if you talk to someone else, you'll get a different opinion. But anyway, enough babbling. We're going to be looking at the Congiuntivo Passato today. Without further ado, let's take a look at our digital whiteboard. So we're going to look at the Congiuntivo Passato. Okay, one of the four main forms of the Congiuntivo. We tend to look at four forms, which let's just go over right now. The four forms of the Congiuntivo. We have the Congiuntivo. I'm going to write Congiuntivo for all of them. So I'm just going to write this 4 times. So Congiuntivo, Congiuntivo, Congiuntivo. Let's see how fast I can write it. Congiuntivo. All right, that's as fast as I got. Okay, we have 4 forms. Congiuntivo presente, which we covered in our last video. Congiuntivo passato, which we will cover today. Congiuntivo imperfetto, that'll be the lesson after this one. And then congiuntivo trapassato. That'll be the one that comes after the imperfetto. So we use 4 tenses with the congiuntivo as a mood. It works with 4 tenses. Okay. Now, as a brief little reminder, in case you haven't seen the lesson before this one on the congiuntivo presente, or maybe if it's just been a while, or maybe you just want a refresher. Whatever it is, what is the congiuntivo? The congiuntivo is what we call a verb mood, congiuntivo. It is a verb mood that works with tenses, that is used for uncertainty, doubts, desires, wishes, hypothesis, or hypotheses, I believe is the plural, and so on. That's why we use the congiuntivo. The moment you're entering into any sort of those emotions, you're going to need to put a verb in its congiuntivo form. Now, depending on the time in which you're talking about something, that's the tense, the tempo. We call those tempo verbale. A tempo verbale is a verb tense. What does that mean? The time, or in other words, when, but the time in which an action takes place. All right. Either now, yesterday, in the future, and so on. Takes place. Perfect. All right. So you may recall that in the Congiuntivo Presente lesson, we covered things such as this. Penso che lui parli l'italiano. This means I think that he speaks Italian. The Congiuntivo Passato is really, really easy, okay? I hope you're going to find it as easy as I find it. All you have to do is take this phrase that we're doing here and basically put it in the passato prossimo. It's not the passato prossimo because it's the congiuntivo version of that. But it's as easy as the passato prossimo. So the way that you use passato prossimo is how you use the congiuntivo passato, just with that extra little kick, that extra little flavor of uncertainty, for example. So I'll show you what that looks like. Oops, let's go back to the pen here. Penso che, and it depends on who you talk to. It's like a regional thing in Italy. It could be penso, penso, you know the way they pronounce it, or penso, penso. I think I pronounce it more like that. But you'll hear some people that go penso. Penso che lui parli l'italiano. That feels a little more northern to me, I'd say. Penso che lui parli l'italiano. It's very similar, well, because I'm the one that's speaking, but maybe you can hear the difference. Penso che lui abbia parlato l'italiano. All we're doing here is we're saying, I think he spoke. What happened with my highlighter? What is that about? I think he spoke Italian. There we go. I like one nice, smooth. There we go. I think he spoke Italian. That right there, my friends, is the whole lesson. We basically could close it up. If this gave you enough of an indice, enough of like something to indicate to you, or a guess as to how to do this, you've got everything you need. But I'm going to break it down for you, okay? I'm going to break it down. We're going to need avere and essere as auxiliary verbs because the congiuntivo passato is a compound verb form. So congiuntivo passato needs avere and essere. Avere and essere, they will be in the congiuntivo presente form. And then you're going to have your main verb, which always goes in its participio passato form. What does that mean? Well, we just did up here. Verbs that end in are end in ato, ato. Verbs that end in ere, uto. Verbs that end in ire, ito. Just what we did in the passato prossimo lesson. All right, so let's see how this actually works. We're going to do a nice review of avere and essere in the congiuntivo presente, because that's how you use them. Io abbia. You know what I'm actually going to do for you today? We're going to do una cosa in più. Let's do something more. Something that I always used to do, and if you take a look at the blog post notes that I have on my website that correspond with the first time around I taught this on my channel, about 10 years ago, I think it was, maybe 11. Oh, wow, I think 11 years ago. Anyway, when I first did it, the way I used to teach the congiuntivo was like this. Instead of saying io abbia, which I'm just going to copy and paste, I'm going to move this over. Here's how I used to teach it. I used to say, hold on, there we go. Put che before it. That way in your mind, you can always know that che, which is so fundamental to the congiuntivo, is always there with your verb conjugations, or the conjugated form, that is. And also, it can kind of help work as an anchor. Okay, che io abbia, different from io ho. I felt like that worked. I no longer need that personally, so I actually don't really teach it that way anymore. But today, we're going to take it back, all right? I'm going to teach it in my old way. Che tu abbia. So actually including something additional, making my verb conjugating like different to help signal in my mind something different is going on here. Though the meaning of this is that I have, it's your standard present tense it is your standard present tense meaning or translation. The feeling of it is different because we're using it with a different mood, the subjunctive mood, the congiuntivo, for doubt, uncertainty, wishing, hypothetical, personal opinions, feelings, and so on. Things that are not necessarily factual. Okay. Che lui, lei, abbia. Che noi abbiamo. Che voi abbiate. Che loro abbiano. Fantastico. Let's do another example, right? Something with that the majority of verbs use avere, so really any kind of possible verb we could think of, most likely is going to take avere. Let's do mangiato, right? Let's use mangiare. So I want to say, penso che, let's say io abbia finito, let's use finire, why not? Penso che io abbia finito, I usually always say tutti I miei compiti, but let's just say, penso che io abbia finito di studiare. Let's do that. So this means, I think that I have finished studying. Okay. That's how we would translate this in English. I think that I've finished studying. This can also be translated to as I think I think I finished studying. It can also work as that. And you could also say, I think I have finished studying. It's up to you if you want to include that. So I'll put it in parentheses. In Italian, though, you do need it. But the reason why I slightly hesitate is because you will see many Italians say something like, penso io abbia finito. You know, they'll omit the che. You really need the che. That's just something that you'll do in the spoken language. You need the che. It's fundamental. Hence why we had it here in our verb conjugated. Our verb conjugation. Mamma mia, I'm all tongue-tied today. Okay, so penso che io abbia finito di studiare. This means I think that I've finished studying. So I think that, penso che, trigger phrase. That means I'm introducing a personal opinion, something that could be uncertain. Maybe I haven't finished studying. Maybe I really should consider continuing because I've got a huge exam tomorrow. That's why we use the congiuntivo, okay? From a functional point of view, if you just got penso che, you're going to need it. Why are we now using the past conditional? Because I'm talking about something that is now over with. I think I've finished, you know? I'm now not going to continue. It's a past action now. It's done and over with. That's why we're now using the past tense here, okay? I think I finished studying. There is something, though, that I do want to point out that will come up a lot in Italian, particularly when you're referring to yourself, okay? I'll show you. Penso di avere finito di studiare. What does this mean? This is very, very common, if not suggested, when you're speaking about yourself. So, penso che io abbia finito. You can perfectly fine say that. Perfectly fine Italian. 100%. Goes good. But you're also going to find it's really common if you're referring to the same person with both verbs, particularly when talking about yourself, you actually don't have to conjugate the verb that comes after something like a penso che, if it's referring to the same person. So penso, meaning I, okay. Penso, and then you put di instead of che. That is really important. And then a verb not conjugated. This is super, super common. I'm just going to show you a few more examples. It means exactly the same thing. I think I finished studying. It means the same exact thing. Literally, it means I think to have finished studying. It makes it a bit more like impersonal, passive voice in a way. But this is completely acceptable in Italian. You can also do this in the present. So penso di finire adesso. Adesso. Otherwise, what would this have to be if you don't do this di and then infinitive? Because usually after prepositions, you use the infinitive form of a verb. The moment you say penso che, trigger phrase, right? Penso che io finisca adesso. Oops, where's my A? There we go. Penso che io finisca adesso. I think I'll be finishing now. I think I'm finishing now. That's what that means. The moment you've got penso che, you got to conjugate that verb. All right? So I'm just going to put that as a note. Penso che plus conjugated verb. And you'll need it in the congiuntivo. One time, this was explained to me as, here's a sneaky way of getting around using the congiuntivo. Just say penso di, credo di, instead of penso che, credo che. Felt so scandalous, you know, like, haha, I'm outsmarting the Italian rules. That's kind of how it was sort of mentioned. Penso di, infinitive, which means unconjugated. Unconjugated. I love the way the word looks. You know, you got the J with the U and then back down again with the G. I love the way that looks. All right. Penso di, unconjugated. There you go. That's how you do it. So you can easily get around the congiuntivo, but remember, has to be. You must refer to the same person. So if I said, for example, tu pensi di uscire stasera? Very, very common sort of sentence in Italian. Do you think you'll go out tonight? It's like saying, you think you'll go out tonight? Now, if I say penso che, trigger phrase, I'm doing that so that you're gonna think of me, you know, when you're coming across this. Tu pensi che? Now, you could just use the future here, but I'm gonna say pensi che? Tu pensi che tu esca? I don't even like the way that sounds, but it works. Stasera. I like instead pensi. Oh, I spelled pensi wrong. So, pensi che tu esca stasera? Pensi che uscirai. I think that's much better for the future. Stasera. Do you think you'll go out tonight? Pensi che uscirai stasera? When you're using the future. This is great. I'm so happy we're covering all these things. They're all important. I know you may be thinking, wait, but weren't we supposed to talk about like avere and essere as auxiliaries? Like what happened? This has everything to do with the topic. And the Congiuntivo Passato is so easy that we can spend time talking about this stuff. This is all really, really important. That way I don't have to make a whole separate lesson just talking about this. It's much better in context than like separate. At least for me, when I'm teaching, sometimes I don't like making small bites of stuff. It depends on the person. It depends on the person, you know? Anyway, there is no future in the congiuntivo, okay? There is no congiuntivo futuro. As such, when saying any, or when using any of the so-called, I'm going to call them cosiddetto. That's what we call so-called. So-called. Any of the cosiddetto, or cosiddetti, we'd have to make it plural. So any of the cosiddetti trigger phrases, So there's no congiuntivo futuro. As such, when saying any of the cosiddetto trigger phrases, you can just use the futuro next. And that's exactly what we did in this example right here. After your trigger phrase, trigger phrase, no worries. Pensi che uscirai? Pensi che uscirò? Like you think I'm going to go out? Pensi che uscirò? Perfectly fine. Using the future, you're good. You're good. It's only presente passato imperfetto trapassato. Remember that from the very beginning? All right, let's move on to essere. So, just though to recap real quick, I hope this makes sense. Get another look at it. If you have a question, leave it down below in the comments section. I think it makes sense. All right. Let's move on to a verb that uses essere. Let's use andare. Let's use partire. I like using partire. All right. I'm going to show you the whole verb partire in the congiuntivo passato. It uses essere as its auxiliary verb, okay? So that means gender number agreement. The moment you hear essere, gender number agreement, concordanza. That's what it's called. Che io sia partito or partita. Che tu sia partito or partita. Che lui sia partito. Che lei sia partita. Che noi siamo partiti or partite. Che voi siate partiti or partite. Che loro siano partiti or partite. So what did we do? Just like we do in the passato prossimo, we've got our auxiliary verb here. It's essere, because partire takes essere. all we had to do was put it in its congiuntivo presente form. Because just like in the passato prossimo, the auxiliary verb is in like the tense before it. You know, think of it that way. In the passato prossimo, avere and essere are in the presente. In the congiuntivo passato, avere and essere are in the congiuntivo presente. That's how it works. And then we just have this as the participio passato form of the verb, just like we have in passato prossimo. Bello, semplice, semplice, not difficult. Let's put together some phrases here. Let's put a little trigger phrase before. Let's say, I always do that. I gotta go back to the pen. So, pensi che loro siano già partiti? This means, do you think they've already left? This can also mean departed. It means left in terms of departed. Do you think they've already left? Why do we have to use the congiuntivo here? Why do I have to say che loro siano partiti? Because I'm not sure if they've left yet. I'm asking you the question. There's doubt here. And then I've got trigger phrase, you know? That wasn't that enthusiastic, but I didn't want to keep doing it always in the same way. We got to shake it up throughout the lesson, you know? Instead of trigger phrase all the time. Anyway, pensi che loro siano già partiti? Do you think they've already left? How could you respond? If you're responding with an affirmative statement, like you know if they've left, you could say this. Sì, mi hanno chiamato, they called me. Mi hanno chiamato e mi hanno detto, and they told me, e mi hanno detto che sono partiti stamattina, let's say alle 10, which means at 10 a.m. So yes, they called me. Using straight up passato prossimo, it's a statement of fact. No congiuntivo here. Yes, they called me. And they told me that they left. Che sono partiti, that they departed. Stamattina alle 10. This morning at 10 a.m. This morning at 10 is what that literally means. But that's how they say 10 a.m. or 10 o'clock. So yeah, they called me and they left. So we have sono partiti here in the indicative. And we have siano partiti here in the congiuntivo because this one expresses uncertainty. This expresses certainty. Hence why we use the indicativo, the indicative. Nice. See how that works? Now that, my friends, is basically it. You know? It's as simple as that. How exciting is that, right? I'm so happy that we got to spend time talking about that, like, you know, pensi di essere uscito. Oh, that's another one. Let's do that. Hold on. Before we close it up, you could say pensi or penso. Penso di essere partito. Penso di essere partito. Wait, so I think I left? Oh yeah, that's how that would work. Penso di essere partito presto. I think I left early. Yeah, I don't know why I don't like the way that sounds. Penso di essere partito. I think I left early. Penso che, yeah, that works. Io sia partito presto. Yeah, it works. Both sentences mean exactly the same thing. One is using this penso di, therefore we don't need a verb conjugated because it's after a preposition. This one is much more like direct and like, this is what I think. Versus this one right here just feels a little bit more uncertain to me. But that doesn't really matter. That's perhaps getting into something else. But point is, I'm really happy we got to highlight that right there because that's a pretty cool part of Italian grammar. Comes up in everyday conversation. And so hopefully now, after having seen it in today's lesson, you'll at least be that much closer to being able to do it yourselves if you're not already able to do so. Cool. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for tuning in and checking it out. As I always say, be sure to check out the prior lessons we've done. Stay tuned for the future ones. Check out all the videos I have on my channel. I've covered all, if not most of these topics already on my channel in one form or another, so there's a lot of content out there for you to see me explain it in different ways. Also, take a look at my videos where I'm just talking, even some of those podcast episodes. I've called them podcasts. They're just like live streams. All those kinds of videos. That way you can see how I use this stuff in practice. And of course, if you're interested in learning with me live, I do weekly live group lessons on Zoom. Check out the description box for the link to head on over to my website to learn more. So yeah, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Always remember to spread the love, and I'll catch you all next time. Va bene? Alla prossima. Ciao!